Namaskar, I'm Ashok Vyas, and today it's my honor and privilege to welcome two individuals who have been instrumental, or rather, one gentleman is more like a key in making a wonderful work which is in my hands right now. And this is a book edited by Professor Hrishikesh Vinod, which is the Handbook of Hindu Economics and Business. Professor Vinod, welcome to our studio. You are teaching at Fordham
University,
presently, and you were also a part of a conference that happened in
That's
2011.
right. Yes.
We'll talk more about that. And Professor Kaushik, your work has also found a place in this book, which is related to sustainability, and you have been very closely connected to academics. Being at Pace University and being a founder of the Helena Kaushik Women's College, which is in Rajasthan. But we come to Handbook of Hindu Economics and Business. How this idea came to you, why you felt the need that there should be some work of this nature available?
There is a long story, but to make it short, I was raised in a very Hindu family and very Sanskrit-oriented family. Both my parents were Sanskrit scholars, so I've been exposed to so much of Hindu and Sanskrit literature.
I'm really sorry, I'm just interrupting you because we are talking in 1962. You just mentioned that you both parents were Sanskrit scholars. Then why did they send you to Harvard even so long as like half a century ago?
Yeah, well, because I got the scholarship with full,
Okay.
full, and I was also the economist. I had a Delhi School of Economics MA.
I see.
So that's how but my interest has been on Hindu economics, but it was the economics we study in Western universities, including Harvard, they never ever mention Kautilya, for example. So Kautilya, who had the first major book on economics, 320 BC. And the way we learn at Harvard is that all economics started in 1776 with Adam Smith. So, I mean, you need to correct that, and that somebody has to do it.
So I'll come back to you, and just to bring Dr. Kaushik, help us a little bit. Another name for Kautilya that he just mentioned is Chanakya. So very briefly, say something about Chanakya or Kautilya from the point of view of economics.
Chanakya addressed the issues of resources of society and how to manage them, efficiently and justly for social benefit, and including a tax system, so that the administration of the economy is high, and then the rulers take care of it, and there is just payment. And if somebody does not behave properly, or there is corruption or some other problem, then there are remedies also prescribed. So Kautilya covered the whole range of economic issues, economic management, and administration of the economy, both at the macro level and micro level. So it's very much, as Professor Vinod said, Kautilya's ideas go back 2,000 years before.
You know, just how modern his thinking was and how relevant it is. So there, in this book, in part 1, you have an essay which talks about focusing of ancient Hindu texts, wherein Kautilya promoted free trade. And then also, which is quite interesting, he advocated tax on prostitute establishments.
Yes.
How much modern thinking this gentleman could have had. This taxing prostitutional establishments, probably it's not yet acceptable even in New York. I don't know about that. So going back to the promotion of free trade, tell me what it says.
Well, Kautilya was interested in getting the Hindu traders know about the rest of the world. See, in those days, there wasn't much exposure to the rest of the world. So he has explicitly said that we would give subsidies to foreign traders who would come and compete with us. But that way, our traders will learn about the rest of the world, about what's going on elsewhere. So he had a welcome mat. So unlike the mercantilists who wanted to discourage foreign trade and just promote own national manufacture, since at that time India was one of the richest countries. Between year 1 and 1700, India represented like 25% of the world GDP.
Sone ki chidiya.
And as a result, they were not so worried about getting, because handicrafts we had dominated that. So we were not worried about, Industrial Revolution changed all that, but back then they were confident. So they were willing to have global trade and global economy and learn from others. So there was really a very interesting world view, which was very practical and which is very relevant even today.
So we'll come back to the other aspects of Hindu economics, and there's one article which refers to sustainability of Hindu growth rate in the book by Professor Kaushik. Tell us how you come to sort of refer growth rate as Hindu growth rate.
First of all, being in the US and studying US history and US economy, we know that over more than 200 years, US has not only become the top economy, the biggest in the world, but it did so at growing merely at 3.5% to 4% a year on a real basis. So that tells you that sustainability of whatever rate it is can multiply, compound over time, so much so that the US actually went to the top. Then the question is, in recent years we experience China has grown for the last 40 years or so at about 10% average growth rate. So now everyone in the world says we should grow at the same rate, including, of course, India, and attempts to do that. So my interest sparked up in this issue of what is sustainable. And then I found culturally, philosophically, as an open society, that somehow of all the cultures and religions, Hinduism is the longest surviving sustainable system of values and people and so on, culture. And that has also survived. And then somebody named Professor Raj Krishna, back 40 years ago, presented the view and trying to explain, since independence, India's growth rate, which of course had been around again 3.5%. And people said, how so? Well, then he jokingly or otherwise, they said, well, that's the Hindu rate of growth. That's all there is to it. And ever since then, everybody has been putting down India and India's growth rate as the Hindu rate of growth, meaning the low rate of growth. So I looked into the statistics of India's growth rate, US growth rate, sustainability of going forward from here now for the global economy is India's economy. And it seemed to me that at least statistics tells us that that's 10% or something like that doesn't look to me like sustainable. So what is sustainable? What is sustainable is maybe 4 to 6%, given all the resource constraints and the environmental impact and so forth, and technological changes, and the actual experience of Europe, which is around 0%, the US around 1-2% in recent years, India around 8% last 10 years average growth rate. So that my view is that we have to be realistic. And that sustainability, both cultural, environmental, and economic, is really comes down to this low rate of growth, which we call it a Hindu rate of growth. So therefore, I say that Hindu rate of growth is really the global rate of growth. That's my view.
So that's the view of Professor Kaushik, and you get to read about that in detail in this book, the Handbook of Hindu Economics and Business that we are talking about, which is edited by Professor Hrishikesh Vinod, who is here with me. And Vinod, you have also an article in the book which talks about socio-economic importance of animals, including cows in India. And that is quite a fascinating way of looking at it from the economic point of view, because cows have always been treated as holy. And
it's holy, yes. Yeah. But if you go back to the ancient literature, there is great understanding of the cow. And cow was regarded as an individual which sacrifices herself for the benefit of others. So cow was considered worthy in that sense, as something that the human beings should follow, that how selflessness. But at the same time, they also had what is called jivo jivasya jivanam, which means that life is surviving because of some other life sacrificing. So therefore, eating of beef, there is considerable evidence that it was being done in ancient days, even by Brahmins. And there are, so I provide evidence on that. And the importance of animals, another aspect of it is, it has to do with our gods. They are on different animals. They are vahan. So that is also, means we try to respect the nature, and that was done through those means. So
have you also somewhere mentioned about Lord Krishna, who always used to see with cows, and maybe he also had some economic vision into that?
Because he, at that time in the agricultural economy, maintaining the cow was a measure of wealth. So it was important, and it did play a purpose, a useful purpose, and it sustained, like Professor Kaushik was saying, it sustained the economy and growth, and so it should be respected, but we should not be fanatical about it. We should look at the evidence, follow whatever is appropriate for modern times. That's actually the beauty of Hinduism, that it evolves, and it allows, we don't have one book and one anything. We have different viewpoints, and we have the ability to evolve. So like one of the papers in the collection says that Hindus will never be extremists, because we don't have one book. Fundamentalism is just cannot happen. So there are some things we should be proud of and we should focus on. You may recall that Max Weber, he had said, given very bad press to India for Hindus, and he promoted the ethic of the, they called it Protestant ethic. And he said that that is responsible for economic growth of India. But if you look at Chanakya, Chanakya also was criticized, but his ethics was much more practical.
So we are talking to professors about Handbook of Economic and Business, Hindu Handbook of Economic and Business actually. There are many questions that you may have, and some of them might be our common questions. So we'll continue with this session of question and answer related to economics as from the viewpoint of a particular religion. Now back to you, and it's slightly away from your book, Professor Vinod. When you say Hindu economics or Muslim economics or Christian economics, then as you see the way countries are governed, when there is a secular nature of the nation, then this question becomes a little bit interesting to address the policies that are being formed. When they'll see that this policy is related to a particular religion, then they'll say that this is something we have to stay away from. So, so the secular nature of a nation and economic policies, if they have some seeds of inspiration from a particular religion, how do you think they may go hand in hand?
I think that's a wonderful question. Yes, a secular country cannot promote one particular religion. And we are not suggesting like Protestant ethic. It means work hard and do your job, and that is certainly very valuable, and it did help the Westerners, and India also should use that. But also the only main point is that it is not the only monopoly. We ought to understand that there is much more deeper thinking that was happening in India for so long. And we ought to recognize it and update some Western notions of it.
So there are some relevant points, like as I was growing up in India, and I remember as a child when one would come to know that such and such a well-known doctor goes to temple, people would say, oh, he's a doctor and yet he goes to temple, as if being religious was something which was due only for people who are either not well read or they are not academically qualified. So when I sit with someone who has studied at Harvard, worked with Bell Laboratories as the first economist, and now teaches at Fordham, has come up with a book about Hindu economics, it tells me that the way we have started understanding our value is changing, or it needs to change, as because there are principles which are relevant for humanity at large, I would say. And I come to you, Professor Kaushik, with another angle that is a part of the book. One chapter talks about dharma and the growth of an individual, development of human capital from a Hindu point of view. Now, it's another interesting economics as well as religion-related theme.
Yeah, and thank you. And that goes back to Chanakya. It is the person and the value system that the person grows in and grows with, and evolves in that value system, understands it, and applies to his or her economic life, and then the social economic life and the whole economy. And that's why wherever we can get the best values in evolution of humankind, and today in globalization, and by the way, Chanakya anticipated globalization because India has been the most open society ever and welcoming of ideas and people and technologies and trade and everything. And therefore, it has people from pretty much everywhere. It has all the religions. And speaking of secularism, a state can and should be secular. That is to say, treat people equally and fairly under the law that the state has, in other words. But individuals, we always take pride today when we say how multicultural India is, that we have a Christian who is head of the ruling party, we have a Sikh who is a prime minister, we have Christians in other positions, and
defense minister is also
defense
Christian.
minister, and that we have still we have at least estimated 4,000 Jews, and they were always welcome. So we have all religious people, and of course we have Buddhists and Hindus and so forth. But that means people individually are belonging to some group, some religious group, and they derive values from that. But as social person, as government, obviously we derive all these good values, and we should derive all those values. So therefore, there is really no conflict between a particular religious view, whether it's Christian or Hindu or Muslim or anything.
I'll just interrupt you here, and I'll say that if you want to know someone, you need to respect them, and then only they open up. So the same way, even culture opens up if you look at it with respect. And I think the contribution of this book is many students would be able to look at what is there in it and how it can be applied. Talking about applications, Dr. Vinod, again, it's an interesting as well as something that has bothered many people, which is the reference of caste, the way it is seen. And you have Dr. R. Vaidyanathan, who has written The Untold Story, Caste as Social Capital.
Yep.
What does it say?
Well, caste is, of course, has been a major problem with Indian culture because it kept down a whole bunch of people. But just to look at it that way is not enough. So what Professor Vaidyanathan has done is that he has brought out some aspects of caste system which may have been beneficial also. And his, believe it or not, his argument is that this Vaisyas, the people who are business people, who need to take a lot of risk. So over the centuries, Indians have been pretty good in going around the world and setting up businesses. So how do this Vaishya caste manage to do that? One of the ways was sharing of risk. And this sharing of risk has been possible because of the caste system. So we can't always just say that everything is bad, because there are some aspects which have been good. And he also emphasizes later in his chapter that Dalits in today's India, Dalits have become big entrepreneurs in many parts of India. So, but the advantage of their Dalit affiliation is that they share the risk with other caste members. So in a society when we did not have insurance companies and big banks, this was a way to make economic progress. And I think that was interesting. But one author also has shown how huge the cost of caste system has been. So we have...
So you have some negatives also in the book, and it's a balanced study, and the time limitation do not permit me to continue with many questions. But Professor Kaushik, I want you to address how people can have access to this book, where it is available.
Very good. And speaking of caste, by the way, Government of India, the Constitution of India has again brought back caste into as a recognized constitutional issue. So caste is not only good, bad, or whatever it is in economic aspects of it and social, political aspects of it, but now it is part of the law and full recognition of caste as an element in giving benefits and so forth, and recognition, all that part of it. So caste is back into center of it. But in terms of accessing the book, of course, there is the website, and people can contact Professor Vinod, who's the editor. And we encourage people to look into it from the value system point of view, and the values that can sustain us, not only India, but larger world. And that is the idea behind this book, to bring thoughtful professors to bring both culture and religion and practices and lifestyle and economics. We call it Hindu economics because it's the source is so the Hindu values.
And I'm again interrupting you because there are so many exciting things about the book. But one particular aspect which when we look at India, or even from ITV when we have live shows, and if there is an astrologer sitting here, a lot of people call, they want to know about themselves and how astrology is related to economics. Dr. Vinod has an article, Impact of Post-Karma in Astrology Chart on Hindu Economy. Tell me more about it.
Well, karma is our philosophy. So generally Westerners think that karma means past karma, bad karma, but that also they assume that karma philosophy people are otherworldly and they are not into materialism. But in reality, the word karma itself is action. So there is, so there is that definition. Plus, we also have greater importance. It's a balanced approach, dharma, artha, kama. So Hindus have developed a balanced approach, holistic approach, which is worth thinking about. But your question was about astrology per se. And it is interesting that they had done a survey of Indian scientists, and overwhelming proportion of them say that they believe in astrology. So most Westerners cannot imagine how a scientist could ever believe in astrology. So I wanted to understand, why is it that only Indian scientists have this favorable impression about astrology? And I came up with two reasons. One reason is because Indian astrology is far more sophisticated and detailed than Western astrology. It's not just dividing people into 12 or 9 different groups and saying that everybody of that group has the same future. No, it is a lot more sophisticated, it's a lot more carefully designed. It has to do with the birth time chart, and how the Bhrigu, the person who invented that or who developed that, he had developed millions of charts. So there is a lot to it, and there is a lot of reason why one should not just throw it away, but try to understand. I think Westerners, especially investors who want to put money in India, ought to try to understand why do Indians believe in astrology. There's a lot of cultural reasons.
Wonderful. So here is an economist advocating astrology, and why he's doing that. The reasons you can find in this book, which is the Handbook of Hindu Economics and Business, edited by Professor Hrishikesh Vinod ji, and then Professor Surendra Kaushik also has an important article related to sustainability in the book, and we ended up with astrology. So let me predict looking at the birth chart of the book, that this is going to prove to be an important reference point in the academic circuit, as well as would enrich anybody who cares to read it. Thank you very much for joining us, and thanks to all of you with lots of good wishes. This is Ashok Vyas.